Hi everyone, I'm Ricky Martin. This is the Recruiter Ricky podcast, and today I have the Chief Exec of the REC, but more importantly, a voice and a thought leader for the labour market, Neil Carberry.
Hi Ricky.
Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, delighted to be here on your media empire.
Oh, what can I say? Like any interview, I'm going to ask you the same standard question that everyone gets asked. Talk to me about yourself.
Oh well, that's the
$1 million
classic opening interview question, isn't it? Neil Carberry, I'm Chief Executive of the REC, which is the UK's recruitment organisation. We've got 14,000 members.
The largest UK's recruitment organisation, I'll add.
Indeed, individual members and companies. Really doing three things. One, standing up for the good that the industry does, talking to government and so forth. Two, holding to standards, so members have to meet code of practice to join, and three, helping recruiters to be the best they can be. So that's a really important job. I've been there about a year. Before that, I think I went through what you'd call boot camp for running a recruitment organisation. I was a recruiter myself for quite a few years, and then after that I have done various things around people and HR. I've done industrial relations, trade union negotiations, things like that. Was at the CBI for a long time, so that boot camp, being involved in a membership organisation and run it being a recruiter. But I also do lots of little side hustles, which you've got to have these days. That's what the youth say, isn't it?
I love the side hustle.
I sit on the council of ACAS. You know, people know ACAS as the organisation where you go when you've fallen out with your trade unions in a massive strike. We're talking today, no mentions of British Airways, but there we go.
I'm supposed to be flying with them soon, so I hope they sort it out.
Well, we'll do our best at ACAS, but actually ACAS take 1 million calls a year from companies and workers looking for advice.
Wow.
So a really important organisation. And I'm also involved in the Low Pay Commission, which sets the British minimum wage, and again a really important thing about raising the wage quickly, but also making sure you look after people's jobs. So lots of, I tend to call it a broad canvas on which to paint.
And that's why I think it's important to say a leading voice in the UK labour market, because it's not just one hat that you're wearing. And I think the context for everyone listening ultimately is you're somebody who's recruited, you're somebody who's hired, you're somebody who's been involved in the membership side, you're leading a government body on professional standards in recruitment. You really do understand what people go through when they're thinking, I want a job. And it's not just, I went through the process 10, 15 years ago. It's current, it's relevant. And as a plug to the REC, HRS is a member of the REC, and we continually have been since our concept.
I really value that, because you've got fantastic business in HRS, which of course won one of our awards.
Won an award last year, and
I couldn't get past without mentioning that.
And hint, we're up for another one this year, so let's see how we go. But this is where it's relatable for people, because the whole point of this podcast is to try and shed a light where possible on either some practical advice people can take to write CVs, interview, but most importantly, how they get hired, how they can get a job. And I think it's a confusing market. I think it's hard if it's the first time you're in the market, and ultimately if you're hiring on the client side, you have a responsibility for doing it right. So Absolutely. With all the experience that you've had in all the many places, have you found any common theme in either what you look for when you're hiring, or pitfalls that people have when they're interviewing and writing CVs?
Well, you're spot on, Ricky, with that picture of what recruitment is. You know, we're all about doing things well because we know it changes people's lives. I think the most important thing when people are looking for work is you want to do something that fires you up. You want to do something you enjoy, and whether it's you're writing your CV or you're going into an interview, that authenticity is really important. Now, it's important not to confuse authenticity with just rocking up and saying what you like. Preparation is really important, but thinking about the outcome that you want and thinking about how you show what you've got to give in a really good and measured way, and you don't you don't sell some picture of yourself that you think the recruiter wants, but actually doesn't really reflect who you are. I think that authenticity is really important in any process.
And you think, is that the thing that when you personally have had to hire either REC, CBR, wherever, is that always the thing you've looked for? Is somebody authentic? Are they what they say they are? Are they interested in your vision, and can they add to it? Is that the key ingredient for you?
Yeah, I think there's a really big thing about, have they thought about why they want to be with us? So not do they know everything about our business, but have they thought about what we do and why that might be interesting to them? And there's a little tell actually when I'm interviewing that I really like. I'm giving this away now, so if you ever interview with me for a job at the REC, you'll know what to do.
You never know. You never know.
Absolutely. And it's this: if someone starts an answer and they says, "No, actually, let me rephrase that," because that means they're thinking about it in the interview. They're not giving me that rehearsed answer. They're engaging with the conversation. I think if you're a hirer, the best interviews feel like a conversation. They feel like some exploring ideas and people exploring what they'd like to do. And if you can achieve that in an interview as a candidate, you're really getting somewhere.
I think that, and I guess in a way, in order to create the environment like that, I think when we're hiring as the interviewer or the hirer, it's important for us to create the right environment where somebody feels like they're in a safe zone, that it's not, I'm going to grill you until you cry. It is, let's find out more about you, and I want hopefully you to have this job as much as you want this job, and it's creating that safe zone.
Yeah, look, I come from quite a working class background, and I think if I go back to years and years ago, I didn't realise when I was starting my career out that an interview is an interview two ways.
Yeah,
it's both about do you want to hire me? It's also about, do I want to work for you?
Absolutely.
And companies show themselves off in their interviews, and it's one of the, I know you always say, Ricky, don't go in there without a couple of questions to ask about the role. Yeah, absolutely, that shows you're thinking about it. But also, you're going to want to know whether this is somewhere that you can spread your wings, settle in, feel that you belong, and grow your career. My advice to hirers and candidates alike has always been, if you go to an interview and you come out a bit kind of churny in the stomach, not really sure, go with your gut.
Yeah.
If it doesn't feel right, it's more likely not to be right.
I think what's interesting that you say that you go in there with some questions, but it's not just questions, it's the questions that are important to you. If you've got a family and you need to work around the family, how do the conditions work? If you're needing to work, reduce, whatever it is. I think people go in with stock questions, i.e. what's the training look like in your company? When can I be a manager in this firm? I think going in with, using your term, authentic questions for you to understand gives you the ability to make a decision. I mean, what's the most authentic question you might be asked now? Have you ever been asked something you're like, wow, that's such an honest question that it's taken me back a bit?
So actually something that I've stolen from Bruce Daisley, who's written a really great book on how to have a really productive workplace and really productive work life, called The Joy of Work. This is published, a really good book. And he found that companies that asked new hires, what helps you perform really well at work within the first week or two, got a massive productivity increase because people felt at home.
Yeah.
So I think for candidates, you can say, I like to work in this way. How do you support kind of people who want to work in the way I like to work?
Yeah.
You're right about the kind of what's the training like question. If you come into the REC and ask that question, you'll get a great answer because REC training is mint. But I think you'll get a stock answer.
Yeah.
Whereas, almost the mirror image of what we were talking about a minute ago, come in and make me think about what I tell you. Because that's another good sign. And
in a way, I guess if we phrase that, ask the questions you're likely to be asked to the interviewer so you understand as much as they do.
Exactly.
Let's go back to you a little bit, and we'll move back on to the candidates and useful information. So you took the chief exec role at the REC. So the REC is the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, in case I haven't said that. You took that a year ago. What drew you to the REC, and what vision are you working on that you can share, just so everyone has an idea of what you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, so I'd been at the CBI for just over a decade, and I think if you stay in a job for a while, what you want to be able to demonstrate to a hirer is that you've got a bit of progression going on. Correct, so I did, while I was there for 13 and a half years, I actually did 6 different jobs, progressively more senior. By the end I was running a reasonably chunky bit of, I basically did all UK stuff for the CBI except Brexit, which is a fantastic brief to have right now, because I'm not responsible for that stuff. But what I was missing, having been a recruiter, was a bit of commercial responsibility. I ran a big budget, but I didn't have the sales responsibility I used to have as a recruiter, or indeed at earlier stages in my career at the CBI. So I wanted to get a bit more hands-on commercial. I'd done policy-style jobs for a long time. I know I can do that. I think it's always I think you always have to feel that you're learning something new, however senior you get. So that was an important piece for me. And also leading an organisation, chief exec's a very different job. And having done lots of work on the labour market and being in a membership organisation, if you want to go looking for that kind of business leadership role, the REC is just a great place to be.
Absolutely.
And a fantastic organisation, really deep well of support from fantastic businesses like your own, Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
But maybe, maybe just in need of nudging in the right direction on a few things, on digital, on how we reach out to the next generation of recruiters.
And if we think of how that can help people, so you're digitising, helping the recruiters of the future, how's that going to help the labour force?
So if you're thinking about, you're looking for a job. Yeah. I want people to go out and contact an REC member, because REC members are bound to a code of conduct. And if you're someone looking for a job and an REC member does you wrong, you can complain to me.
Absolutely.
And I've got a conduct committee with the TUC and the CBI on it who will take your case on if you feel it's not been adequately resolved by the recruitment firm in question. But I also want you to be able to go on my website and see a few videos about, here's your interview tips with Ricky Martin, things like that.
To be filmed soon,
absolutely, yes. For on a big kind of grand tour Amazon style production budget, no doubt. But in doing that, we also want people to be able to navigate. So click into the website and go, I'm looking for a job in accountancy in Leicester. Boom, you're going to get 3 or 4 names, 3 or 4 companies in your local area who've passed our compliance test, who you can trust, and who, if you have a conversation with, might be able to point you in the right direction about a few things. Maybe they'll have something that's interesting. Maybe they'll be able to point you somewhere else. But just giving people a greater guidance on how to navigate the labour market.
I think what's interesting is whether this is the right or wrong thing to say to you, because obviously I work well with you guys, but I've always seen the REC as really a place for the recruiters, i.e. a place for us to adhere to contact, be given support, also a place for us to refer our customers to if there are any issues. But what we're actually saying, it's much bigger than that. It's how can we help the labour market employability? And if someone wants a job, they can come to you. You've got some compliant recruiters, you've got processes, useful information. It's a tough term and people use it a lot, but almost a one-stop shop for helping them with their future employability.
So I think that's right. Look, I'm a great believer in purpose. I think businesses have to have purpose beyond just making money. Making money is great, and it's what
keeps us all in jobs.
Keeps us all in jobs. But actually, it's about why do you do it? Why do you? And it's a bit like, why do you do your job? I mean, I've always run my career on the basis that if I don't enjoy doing it, I'm not going to do it. So I have shifted jobs a few times because I've just stopped enjoying doing something and gone off to do something else. I think in that, for us at the REC, we believe in supporting Britain's recruiters because we think it helps British businesses grow, and it opens up opportunities for British workers. But that's because of the good that recruiters do. So a lot of you're absolutely right, Ricky, our specialism is in helping recruiters. But we help recruiters not just because it helps recruiters do well, but because recruiters doing well helps everybody.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key thing that, to me, is liberating to know that's the direction of where you're going. And hopefully for anyone out there thinking about hiring, even if you're a recruiter, who do I go to for help? More importantly, I want a job. There are places that are upskilling the professional workforce. The recruitment workforce is upskilled, and this by no means is a sell for the REC. I'm very impartial, despite I am a member, because let me put it out there for everyone out there. The REC make me do a compliance test every 2 years. So it's not like I just pay my money, they give me the membership. I have to sit a compliance test. If I don't pass it, I'm not an REC member. So that should give confidence to people that those recruiters can help. Let's take some of these learnings, because I think what we've been able to do is illustrate both your credentials, interest, and clearly your passion for the labour force and employability. If I was coming to your company today, and I wasn't Ricky Martin, I wanted a job at the REC, and even if it's not the REC, whatever you're involved in, and I gave you my CV, what are you looking for in that CV? I know you want authenticity in the person, and that will come out in the interview, but what are you looking for in the CV?
I'm looking for you to show that you've thought about what we do in your CV.
Okay, so you as a company and where you're going?
And our sector,
Okay.
and I'm looking for you to be able to show off. Now, in the kind of, I'm chair of an academy trust at primary school, and the teachers there all use this acronym WAGOL, which stands for What a Good One Looks Like.
Brilliant, I've never heard it.
And all the kids know it, and the parents are completely confused by classic education.
Yeah.
But for me, a CV that comes in, the best example is one that's specifically referencing things that are that I've made a point. I have very deliberately drafted the job description and the advert. If you can tick things off on the CV, that's you straight through the first screen.
And where do they, again, it might sound a silly question, but I think it's quite helpful. You want the CV to talk to you and look like they've read what you've put together and it reaches out to you. How do they put that in their CV? Let's just say the role is asking for somebody with enthusiasm, flair. There's a way of writing that can help, but is there somewhere they can write that, any particular section that can bring that to the table?
So I think we're looking for examples. We're looking at how you talk about things, how you demonstrate that what you brought to something. Dry CVs are very difficult to deal with, especially 8 to 10 page ones, and occasionally we see those. I think for me it's about being very specific, feeling free to use language which sells yourself a little bit more than we as kind of classic British people like to. Not going over the top, but just being very, very clear. Short sentences work.
Is it fair to say at this point people can be a bit selfish? Because I'm not saying they have to oversell, but they also at the same time have to showcase what they've got to offer.
So I think it's really important, and you think about how you tell the story of what you've done before. So perhaps you've got a list of where you've worked before, or you've got a list of, if you're early career, you're going to major a bit more on education. I think in there, tell us a story about what you did. Don't just tell us where you were. And in doing that, really kind of ask questions about what you were doing and whether you can sell it in the kind of language that the company's using.
Okay.
So you might have been, treasurer of the Drama Society. Which skills were you showing off in doing that? Don't just think of it as something I did on the side. Start to draw out and demonstrate that you've done some of this. I think one of the bits of advice I give to a lot of people who are early career is you've got more skill, you've demonstrated more skill than you know. Yeah. So that interrogation and then getting it onto the CV in a really kind of engaging way, so that you don't give me, this is where I went to college, this is where I went to school, but instead it's, this is where I went to college and these are the things I did.
What's interesting, you use one word, I'd say about 3 times in how you explain, which is the word story. Because this is what CVs are. We're writing the story of our past to help us for the future. So do we want to read a boring story? If I'm being critical, nobody picks up a book or a story and they want it to be boring, they want it to be engaging. And I guess what we're addressing is give us that story, and remember that story time's a good time, and let's illustrate the points and help the user. And interesting for someone writing this, I think, which is the point you've come up with a few times, is the thing that's really jumping out to you is somebody taking the time to tailor a CV for you. Don't just write a CV. I don't think it's unfair to say, don't just write a CV and send it to 50 applications and hope that one lands, because it's a generic profile which is generically saying, I can't be bothered to talk to you.
So I've when I'm counselling people who've had a tough time, I quite often say you need to remember that for a candidate, recruitment is a kind of is a small goal thing. You're looking for one job, and you might do 50 applications.
Of course.
So you need to be thinking in terms of, how do I tailor my CV to maximise the chance of this one being the one job? That's about being engaging. It's that point about story. What have we learned from world politics in the last 5 years? Facts don't carry the day. You need to be able to sell it. You need to be able to tell the story and be human about it. And then think about the person who's reading your CV. They probably, in lots of jobs, they'll have 20, 30, 40 applications. If they're going through CVs, they're probably going to take time to read it once. If it's it's a couple of pages. Why yours and not the next person's? And that's the way to think about it.
And if we put that into practical terms, because again, that is, look, I've got a story, but I want to read the blurb that gets me to the point and bring it out there. Let's say I put 10 CVs in front of you today. All the CVs, and this is very unlikely, but hypothetically, all the CVs had the same amount of experience working for the same companies and told a very similar story. Are there other bits they can do with CV or supplementary information to bring out their personality? What else can they add to that if it's the same story that others are presenting?
So I think it's really important to give some, I suppose presentation is important. So give me quick access into the information you're trying to sell. Really draw out the, if you've got, I don't know, management skills, for instance, show me on my first scan that you've got management skills, even before I've read it properly.
Okay.
Make sure that you're casting your net wide from where you're drawing your experience from. So if you've got 3 previous jobs on your CV, don't just tell me loads about what you're doing now. Demonstrate that progression from what job to job for me. Tell me a bit about about the rounded individual as well. So it's always quite good. I like people to put an interests line at towards the tail end
like
of a CV.
Like a hobbies and interest type section.
Don't go large on it, but just give me a sense of the rounded individual, because that's you beginning to move from it being a piece of paper to being the human being you're going to need to be in the interview.
So show us the human factor, and I guess I don't know if it's an easy one to answer, but can you think of the most interesting interest or hobby you've ever read on a CV, if not your own?
Oh well, my own. I don't. It's not on my CV, but I can play the steel drum.
Okay.
And I was once jailed in Cuba. Neither of those feature in my CV.
The second one, I get that. You're not hiding evidence, but I probably wouldn't lead with that. But steel drum's a great one to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got a great joy of going to comprehensive school in the 1980s. we had a steel drum because we were really right on. And actually, given that I lack musical talent generally, it's quite easy by comparison with many instruments.
But I just think simply adding something like that, which is an interesting instrument, it's even got us talking probably a little bit more humorous about the topic, and I guess that's what we're illustrating, the human factor we want to see. Yeah,
and one of the things, of course, that really helps when you get into the interview is if you have that discussion, you're interviewing me, and you pick up at the tail end of the interview, once you're through all the questions you prepared about the steel drum, we suddenly get into a conversation that genuinely is a conversation. And yes, absolutely, you're not assessing me on fit with the role anymore, but you are still thinking, is this someone I want in my organisation? And we always got to remember that that's running under a lot of the interview process as well.
People are working with people; they're not working with CVs.
Exactly.
I'll ask you this question, but you can outright say no. And I'm just keen to see if there's a consensus. Have you ever offered the role to somebody out of the strength of their CV, but they just haven't been the person you wanted at an interview?
No,
you haven't. Okay. Well, I was hoping the answer would be yes, because I can humbly say that I've done that.
Well, this is interesting. So why did you do that?
I like the role play reverse here. Yeah. And I can honestly say that for a lot of SME companies, particularly in the early stage of a business, there's positions where SME companies are trying to grow, and there might be a profile that you see on paper is magic.
Yeah.
And that is what I need in my business because it tells my story, it boosts my vision. And I've interviewed somebody and they've been somewhat underwhelming.
Yeah.
And probably at the point of an SME, at the stage of resources and not having them, it is, I'll make the hire and hopefully it will work out.
Yeah.
And the one thing I can honestly say is, anytime we're going into a process saying, I hope it will work out, you should not hire the person. It's a really bad... The person was not detrimental to my firm, but they were not right for my firm, and they had a fair shot, but it didn't quite work out. So
I think that's really interesting. And I'm a great believer in kind of being contextual about this stuff. If you think about the people I hire people. Yeah. So if they can't do it face-to-face, whether it's in an HR team or as a lobbyist or offering advice on our legal helpline to recruiters, then they're not going to be able to do the job. Yeah. There are other jobs where perhaps it's basically the delivery of quite a hard technical skill.
Yeah.
And there I can see the attraction a bit more, especially in tight labour markets.
Let's think it the other way, because I know that when I made that hire and I didn't make the right hire, obviously nothing went wrong for everyone in the end, it just didn't work out. But if we flip that on its head and say, if you're looking for a job when you're into, if you leave a company and you think, I don't know if it's quite right for me, like I have in my example, I didn't think the candidate was quite right, but I wanted their CV. You might have the best brand with what looks like the best job, but if you don't feel like they're right for you, please don't feel compelled to take the job.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to them at that point, other than don't take the job? How can you help them to be resilient? Because they might be led by it's the brand, it's the pay, it's the location, all the factors which aren't the reason we love what we do. They're all the supplementary reasons. Is there any advice you can give them to make them feel comfortable with turning that opportunity away?
So I have one sort of thing that I've used for years and others that I know have used well, which is have an exit strategy for any job you take.
Okay.
So if you are looking at a company and you think it'd be really great to have that brand on my CV, maybe that's true, but don't think about the hiring manager who's sitting opposite you now. Think about the next one.
Yeah.
And if you can't stack up that in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years time, you'll be able to get the next job that you want because of where you've gone now, then you definitely push things back. My views have always been never take a job without knowing what the exit strategy is. When that exit strategy might be progression in the company, it might be moving on to a different sector. It was certainly always in my head when I took my managing directorship at the CBI that my next step was the kind of job that I've got at the REC. I'm not a great believer in kind of sketching out your 40-year career plan because I think the labour market changes and your interests change.
It's impossible to predict.
But you can think a couple of years down the line about where do I want to go. Now if I think about my CV now, what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about what are those 3 bullet points that go under the REC? What are those 3 things that I've changed as chief exec about the REC that will make the next person who hires me think, Neil's the guy for me?
That's how he's driven the change.
Yeah, exactly. As a member, I'd like to reassure you, I'm not currently in the market.
Well, it just so happens there's a policy role coming up in HRS now. I'm only joking.
Not for me.
But I think that's reassuring. I don't think there's lots and lots of jobs that you call jobs for life. And I don't think there's anything wrong going into an interview and saying that this is my 5-year plan. And I think people think if they're asked the question, where do you see yourself in 3 or 5 years? The stock answer is, if it's a more junior role, management in a few years, I'd like to have a larger leadership role in 5 years. That answer could be in 5 years, I actually do want to do something different with my career and I'm looking to have the support and the development in the period to help me. Because some companies are happy with that. They're happy with they need someone for 3 to 5 years. You want a job for 3 to 5 years, mutual relationship, and it's the best thing that ever happened.
The best people I've hired who've helped me the most are often people who've come in and said, look, in 18 months' time, I'm going to move out of London. I'm going to do something fundamentally different. But I've got 18 months. Yeah, and I can do this job.
And in 18 months, they might help you do something else outside of London, and it might be something you can't even think of right now.
Exactly.
Okay, so if I start thinking of providing some final thoughts from you, because we've shared quite a lot, and I think what's interesting is people hire people. You always like to see on authenticity and what people bring to the table, and you like to understand their stories. Are there any final bits of advice or wisdom or anything you want to share for our listeners just to take away?
So, many's the time I've come across the saying, I've written you a long one because I didn't have time to write a short one.
Okay.
And the same, while I've mentioned that about CVs earlier, the same actually goes for interviews and interview answers. You can sometimes feel under pressure in an interview and you really want to show everything you can do. You're not there to show everything you do. You're there to answer the questions and be authentic. And actually, your ability to answer the questions in a nice punchy way to the point is going to be a bigger winner than having 52 bullet points of experience. So just thinking through how do you keep that conversation flowing by almost making sure that the interviewer speaks as much as you do, that you answer the questions fully, but you do so in a way that's really kind of punchy and to the point. One way of thinking through that, and it's what I do when I'm doing any kind of pitch, is just start from what is the outcome I want here. Now, in an interview, the outcome I want is to get to the next stage, to be hired, to get the job offer. How do I know how I'm going to do that? Well, the good thing is these guys have written me a list of what they want. So demonstrate that as punctually as you can. You don't need to tell people everything. I've seen really good candidates damage their prospects in an interview because the answer that was really good in the first minute is really bad by minute 9.
Okay. So is that what they've contradicted it at that point?
I don't know. To be honest, to some extent, yes. But I mean, how far have I zoned out of whether this is a good answer or not by that stage? So that thing about just keeping it really pointed, I think there's a reason there's a question. Answer the question.
And I think to add on top of that, if you don't mind me just adding a bit more, is answer the question that's been asked. Because there's answering a question, but there's sometimes deflecting the lack of knowledge or response by answering something. To me, that's one of my biggest frustrations. Someone doesn't answer what I ask, because I do sit there thinking, I don't know if I could work with you because you don't give me straight answers. Yeah,
and that's the risk of lots of companies use competency-based interviewing.
Absolutely.
And therefore you're looking to use examples, and you absolutely should use good, real examples. And again, you should think about all of the things you've done and where you can draw different examples from. Coming as someone who royally screwed up a load of milk round interviews when I left university.
Love it.
No one in my family had ever been to university before, so I didn't know what you did. But if that is the process that you're going through, yes, absolutely use examples, but don't take your best example and hammer it into the question.
Yeah.
Think about the example that best fits the question.
I love it. Well, thank you very much. There's not just one piece of wisdom, there's multiple in everything we've said. So thank you, Neil. All the very best for the rest of what you're doing at the REC. I know I'll be there with you every step of the way that I
Fantastic.
can. But thanks very much.
Excellent. Well, thanks for the invite.
No problem.